Hello and welcome to this video on Guna and vriddhi. That is the different qualities that the vowels have in Sanskrit. It's called vowel gradation. It's, as you'd expect, normal and regular in Sanskrit, but is closely reflected in Pali, not in the same rigid way. But again, as so often happens for the Pali students among you, you will understand what is happening in Pali much better if you see what is lying behind it under the strict rules of Sanskrit. Now, the gradation of vowels, the different grades or qualities that the vowels have, is reflected to a certain extent in English. It's not the same thing, it's not the same as the Guna and the vriddhi, these strict rules, but I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that happens in English, which more or less reflects the way and the reason why vowels will have different qualities in Sanskrit. So let me share my iPad screen with you. Here we go. Take, for example, let's go into English now before we go into the Sanskrit and Pali. Take, for example, the word photograph. Now, photograph, notice the pronunciation of the first O. It's long, it's the English O diphthong sound. And the second O is pronounced long, photograph. And the second O is pronounced short with an photograph. Now, what happens if you put an ER on the end? We don't say photographer, that becomes photographer. So the quality of the vowels changes here because of the different stresses. So now we have the first O becomes a short sounds like an sound, the neutral vowel, and this second O becomes stressed but short, O, photographer. Let us now change it. What happens if we put an IC on the end? And it's not photographic or photographic, it's photographic. So again, because of the difference in stress, the quality of the vowels changes. In photographer, this A here was a short neutral vowel, photographer. In photograph, in the southeastern or received pronunciation of English, it was a long R, photograph. But now here it becomes photographic. So this same vowel A is pronounced as an or an R or an A, depending on stress and position in the word. And in photographic, the first O carries what we know as a secondary stress. So it's half stressed. Photographic. The main stress is on the A, secondary stress is on the O, photographic. And the second O is a neutral vowel, photographic. Not the same thing, but a similar kind of thing happens in Sanskrit and Pali, and in Vedic it was dependent to a certain extent on stress and pitch, though for the purposes of our study we needn't bother too much about pitch at all in high and low tones. That's peculiarly Vedic and not in classical Sanskrit or in Pali, but to a certain extent, it depends on stress. So let me now explain to you what this vowel gradation is in Sanskrit and Pali. First of all, the word Guna. Guna is the first grade, and vriddhi is the second grade. Guna, the word Guna originally means a string or a thread, used as the string of a stringed instrument, the Guna. And then the thread that runs through something is its quality. So it means the quality of something. And so Guna is the word used by grammarians is for the vowel with the enhanced quality, I to E, U to U. Vriddhi means increase, growth or increase. And that's where the quality of the vowel is further increased. So, Guna, I, by Guna, the unstressed or zero grade is I. In Guna, E. And likewise, U, short U to Guna becomes O. In Sanskrit, but not in Pali, the vriddhi, the further increase, E to I and O to Au. What's actually happening here is the addition of in Guna, is the addition or the notional addition of the letter A in front of the I. So in Sanskrit phonetics, you never have an A and an I together. Oops. It automatically becomes E. So let us take the word, the root, for example, vid, meaning to see or to know. To make a verbal noun out of that, we know the word vid and vidya in Pali, vidya, ignorance, vidya, knowledge, avidya, ignorance. Sanskrit, vidya with a dy, vidya. Making knowledge out of that, we gunate or apply guna to the vowel of the root. So vid, to that I we add an A. But the A plus the I, A plus I, E. So vid becomes Veda. So the Vedas and the Vedas and Ayurveda and the old scriptures, the Rig Veda and so on. That is the verbal noun from vid with guna or gunation, as we can say in English, gunation of the root vowel. So vid to Veda. And let us now see what happens with U. So bud. It often happens that you can make a verbal noun not with the addition of an A, but with an I. So the same kind of thing happens as from vid with guna of the root vowel, vid, Veda. So bud, A plus U notionally, O, bo. So we get bodhi. So we have the bodhi, wisdom or enlightenment. We have the bodhi tree in Buddhikaya. So the bodhi there is our very familiar root bud, past participle Buddha, verbal noun with the guna of that u, so it makes it bodhi. With the vowel r, let's take the verb, the root mri, to die. And that can make a verbal noun, adding, for example, ana as a verbal noun, one of the many verbal noun endings, to the gunated root. So, a plus r, because that becomes ar. So marana. So mri to marana, the mar here is the gunated vowel, or the root mri with the vowel gunated to become ar. So not mrana, but marana. And as we know, the vowel re, this subdotted r, has been lost in Pali, but you will see many traces of it when it comes back in its gunated form. So, for example, he dies in Sanskrit māṛayati, in Pali mīyati. The r is lost. You just hear the e, mīyati. And Sanskrit, for example, mrita, dead, in Pali becomes mata. Where's the r gone? If it's just in its r form, mrita, you don't have it in Pali, it changes to something else. But we see the r coming back in Pali in marana, which is dying. I mean, the process of dying is marana. So that is why knowledge of one of the numerous cases, I've said it so many times, where knowledge of what's happening in Sanskrit will completely explain what might otherwise be obscure and inexplicable in Pali. So here we see the gunation of the short I, U, and Ri. You will very often find, in fact more often than not, that where you get a verb root with a short I or a short U, as in vid and bud, followed by not a consonant cluster but a single consonant, then more often than not that vowel, that root vowel, will be gunated in the present tense, or the whole of the present system, including imperfect, optative, and imperative. Now let us look at a couple more instances of guna. Let's take the root bhu. Now, long e and u can gunate as well as short e and u. And long e and u, like short I and U, also gunate to O, so E and O. So bhu, looking at Sanskrit now, and then see what happens in Pali, because what happens in Sanskrit explains what happens in Pali. The bhu, in the present tense, it becomes, you gunate the bhu to bho, and you add ati. But not quite yet. Ati is the very familiar third person singular form, he, she, it does so and so. We know bhavati it is. Now, in Sanskrit, the a plus u or plus u, both of them change to o. When a vowel follows the o, as in bhō-ati, it resolves itself back into au. So the bhō-ati, in fact, becomes ba-ati, and this word then becomes its corresponding semi-vowel. So bhavati. That is how we get bhu. You gunate the u to o. So hypothetically, this form doesn't actually exist, but it explains the intermediate process. Bhu, gunated, bho, ad ati, bho ati, but you can't, when the o is followed by a vowel, it regresses to being the av. So bhavati, bhavati. So bhavati is just your bhu with the u gunated and back to av after the, before the following vowel of ati. Bhu bhavati. And you see the same, for example, ni, to lead. So a plus e or e makes a. That's by Sandhi. So ni, to make the present tense, here we go, you gunate to ne. Sorry, I've written along. I don't need to write it because a is always long. Ne and add ati. But just as you cannot have asterisks to show it's a non-existent form, just as you cannot have bho-ati, it becomes bhavati, by exactly the same process, ne-ati becomes the correct form nayati. So the ne followed by ati, it's notionally nayati becomes, so the e goes to its semi-vowel nayati. That is how ni, non-existent form with guna ne ati, resolves to nayati, just like bhu, bho ati, non-existent, resolves to bhavati. And the same as we've just seen for marana, for example. That's rather simple. It's just the r becoming ar. Now let us look at vriddhi. The guna is the vowel I, U, R. What happens to it if you put an a, if you strengthen it by putting the a in front of it? Is that I becomes e, the U becomes o, the R becomes ar. Incidentally, guna, does it have a guna? It said that it is its own guna. So it doesn't, if you gunate short it remains Okay, I hear you say if you put an plus an then it becomes a long Yes, in ordinary phonetics, in ordinary Sandhi it does. But for the purposes of guna, just the is its own guna. So the guna of is Now let us look at vriddhi. Vriddhi is a further increase beyond guna. It's sometimes called the secondary grade, the next grade after guna, the next grade up. Vriddhi, as I said, it means strengthening. And just as the guna, you notionally add a in front of the vowel in question. A plus e, short a plus e, a, short a plus u, o. For vriddhi, you actually add a long a. Long a. So here, a is vriddhied, we'll use it as a verb. A is vriddhied or strengthened to a. E is strengthened to I, sometimes written I, and U is strengthened to au, sometimes written with a long a, and R is strengthened to R. So I'll give you the Guna forms down here. There's vriddhi in this column, Guna in this column. As we already said, the Guna of A is unchanged, A. The Guna of E is E. The Guna of U is O. And the Guna of R is R. So A through Guna A unchanged to vriddhi A. E to Guna E to vriddhi I. U to Guna O to vriddhi au. And R to Guna R to vriddhi R. Now in in Sanskrit, then we have these diphthongs, I and au, but they do not exist in Pali. We have an E and an O in Pali. So we have, in Sanskrit, we have E and I, and we have O and au. But in Pali, it's all E. E and I both become E, sorry. Oops. O and au both become O. Let me give you an example here. Vid. We see that root in Pali as well. Veda. By Guna, Veda. Same in Sanskrit and Pali. Now, let us look at the word for a doctor. In Sanskrit, we've got the word Veda meaning knowledge. One way, there are many, one way of making a person of knowledge, turning the word for knowledge, Veda, into a person who has knowledge, is by vriddhi of the root vowel and changing the a to ya. So Veda, vriddhi the root vowel, so instead of it becomes I, and change the a to a ya, Vaidya. So a Vaidya from Veda, a Vaidya is a man of knowledge. It means a doctor. Now in Pali that same word exists, but in fact that vriddhi I remains Guna E, and the J, as so often happens, becomes a double J. So this Vaidya in Sanskrit with the vriddhi I becomes Vedja in Pali. To give you some other examples, let's look at the causative of roots in A. The root mri. Very often the causative, that's the one that ends in ayati in Sanskrit and eti in Pali. Very often you will get the vriddhi of the A in the root. So mri, vriddhi, we've just seen, becomes a long R. So in Sanskrit, to put to death, to cause to die, is mārayati. And you also get that vriddhi, for example, the vriddhi of that vowel in the one who causes death, the killer, our old friend Mara. So Mara is from the root mri, but with vriddhi of that vowel followed by an a. So Mara. From the root bhu, to make a causative verb, so bhu to be, so to cause to be, is bhavayati. So bhu, vriddhi, so bhu, the wrong u, vriddhi of u is au. Sorry, what's going on here? Au followed by ati, by santi becomes bhavati. Sorry, ayati I meant to write. It applies to any vowel if I meant to write ayati. So au plus ayati becomes avayati. So where we have in Pali, in Sanskrit, bhavayati, in Pali, bhaveti. So this lengthened a in bhaveti means to cultivate or develop. You know this word better. Bhavana, you see. Cultivate wisdom. Vidyam bhaveta. Very common word in the Pali scriptures. That is just this u of the root, vriddhid, that's the double strengthening, into bhav. So bhu with guna bhavati, but with vriddhi bhavayati in Sanskrit, bhaveti in Pali. Now the guna and the vriddhi, I've given you just a few examples of how they're used. By the way, the table now you have in full, that's it. It's actually quite simple to learn. I'll just show you another